We make what we made since the world began. Nothing more. Love of the women, love of man. Seasons round, creatures great and small, up and down. It's a rise and fall. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone, and so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. And we can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And along the way on my journey to dissect and to continue to explore the lineage of our cultural heritage and the music of our cultural heritage, it is always vital and cathartic to connect with cats who have been playing music, timeless music that goes back thousands of years, way before this country, the United States of America, ever even existed. And there's a cat that I've been after for some time. She's very melodic, rhythmic player, and she plays the Indian percussion instrument known as tablas, and she's very dedicated to giving back and making sure that the lineage of the rhythms of her homeland not only stay with inside her own internal time field, but also giving back to younger students and younger cats who have had digital beats crunched into their ears for many, many, many years. Roshni Samlal, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much. That was a really beautiful description, and I would love that in writing.
I can transcribe that. No, I mean, is it accurate? Is it accurate?
I would like to think that it's a good mission statement and mode, and a good reminder, on a daily basis when I sit in front of my tabla or I sit on the stage. Or I do teach, but so thank you for that. That was very inspiring.
Well, I mean, to me, it's like you have earned that. I mean, I wonder. I am curious the fact that you're on the ground. If you could talk a little bit about the idea that when you work with younger cats. I mean, it says you work in the New York public school system, and so when you work with younger cats, do you notice how you work with kids that literally have been listening to pop music that has automated drum machines and rhythm? How do you try to unlock their ears?
Yeah, as a New York City public school teacher, I'm teaching everything. I'm teaching writing, I'm teaching math.
Holy cow, you're a full, I thought you were just I thought you were a tabla instructor.
I am as well. I do that privately. And I do, small little community programs where I'll do like workshops. But I'm also kind of like confronting the school system as a teacher of all subjects as well. So I can speak to both of it, but specific to your question, having, kids experiencing music in a more automated way versus, physically slowing down to produce their own sense of tone and their own sense of inhabiting that musical space, sometimes is a challenge. Just kind of using helping students like realize their own physicality and their own sense of like how the grid can be created in their consciousness and brought to the musical space, I think is always something, you know, that one has to work on cultivating and you know, that's something that I keep on cultivating in my own self, just my sense of the cycle, my sense of where it's going, the linearity of it. You know, so it's that's really where the starting point is for me, I think.
Oh, it's beautiful. I mean, can you give a tangible example when you are doing musical application, how you try to get them to be in touch with their physicality and their own heartbeat? I mean, I think that people say, "Oh, I have terrible rhythm. I can't." It's not. I mean, or I can't drum. I don't have rhythm. Everybody has rhythm.
Right.
And so how? I mean, can you talk about how you, how you apply your life force to the student musically?
Yeah. Just, you know, in my own small way of teaching, I feel like just bringing it to the body, bringing it to language, bringing it to cadence within speech, you know, because tabla really lends itself to that. It exists as a recited language as well. If you're reciting the cycles, you know, like da, din, din, da, and like really just focusing on language, focusing on clapping, like keeping like that clapping pattern. And you know, for a lot of students, just that alone and sitting with that it takes a lot of deceleration for them to just start there. You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's something, honestly, everything that I'm saying about the little that I do with my students, I'm still doing that for myself too. So, you know, just to feel the space, establish the space, sit with the space, and then, you know, like there are so many prescribed ways in the tradition too of how you fill space, you know, with subdivisions and, you know, having that be the foundation of your rhythmic experience. And then maybe from that point going into the more complex compositions is always, I think, like a good approach, you know, because in tabla playing, the compositions themselves kind of feel like they're such like solid entities unto themselves, you know, like it's a poem. It's like a concrete poem, and it's like, this is the composition and you learn to say it and here's how it resolves. But it's so complicated sometimes that, you know, like you might just like think of it kind of outside of the rhythmic cycle a little bit, like without maybe thinking of how it will fit or how it naturally fits within the cycle, you know?
Absolutely. You're articulate. I mean, you're telling me how many hours a week do you actually spend teaching tabla? I mean, to students. I mean, I had no idea you're like a grade school teacher.
I am, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, I was like, that isn't, so I mean, you're really like, I mean, to me, it's like, so how many hours a week do you actually do the music?
As far as being a teacher?
Yes. Not the gigs, not the, I mean, because clearly that's where your passion.
I have about 5 students in rotation, you know, so like I spend maybe like 3 hours a week teaching tabla. Most of my hours these days, especially during the summer, is spent just playing out, you know. But again, I am also a mom, so I'm teaching my own children as well, and that's where I really want to backtrack and, you know, really think about how to best communicate it to them in a way that will be the most impactful. You know, and a lot of us kind of start learning, like we go to these classes and maybe not necessarily or how to bring it to our consciousness, you know, like how to really just own it. So just trying to develop practices that allow for that as a teacher, I think, is important.
I've done about 3,500 radio interviews, and a lot of them have been with the, you know, the some masters of Indian music. Many of them, awesome. Cats that are, you know, unfortunately I wasn't able to get to some that have left, but you know, many of them talk about the ritualistic sort of practices that went into, you know, they'd be washing dishes, and then they'd have to be chanting the raga chants, ding ding ding, you know, ding ding ding, like while they did that, and I wonder, with children in West, I mean, I assume they live here. I mean, how do you make it a lesson as authentic as possible? I mean, I interviewed this cat. I'll have to bring his name up. I mean, he's a Sarod player, but he was talking about, like, his dad was just, I mean, so strict with him, so strict. And his mom one day was like, why? His mom went to his dad. He was listening through the door, and his mom's like, you know, why are you so hard on him? Like, what is the point of this if he cannot see the light? And the father said, you know, because I believe he can be a Guruji, because I believe that he has the ability to do this. And so, you know, how authentic are you able to bring the music to your kids? I mean, this is really important.
Right. Well, lucky for me, being in New York City, I have the opportunity of being a part of a collective called the Brooklyn Raga, and just being in New York in general, I feel like we have so many authentic encounters with music and performance and people who are diligently applying themselves to having musical ideas, expressing them, you know, especially in relationship to tradition. So because of groups like this, and such a living sense of where the music is going and the society around it, honestly, that's been very helpful to me and to my children as well, in just really seeing what it does, seeing the effect of it, feeling it, immersing it, having a living context for it, you know. So that helps now. If you see it like that, you see the most refined and polished outcome, and then you can backtrack and see, oh wow, so you sit for 3 hours a day and you practice, you know, that's where the repetition goes, that's where the sweat goes, and you know, so kind of like seeing the whole trajectory of it, seeing the audience receive it, I think that really kind of helps. And that's kind of just one direction of how to interpret, you know, like,
yeah, I mean, because how were you taught? I mean, right. You know, I mean, to me, it was like.
Just to backtrack, yeah. I mean, I first encountered Indian classical music in Trinidad as a little girl, and I was lucky that my father was one of the first Trinidadians. And Trinidad is a little island.
Wait, hold on. You have Trinidadian blood in you?
Yeah, I am Trinidadian.
No, you are not. You really are. You're from. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, like, there's no East Indian blood in you?
Well, that's a complicated question because my ancestors are East Indian.
This is ridiculous. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You know, well, you can thank colonialism for this complication.
Absolutely.
But I'm glad to have some complicated detours in my way. But, you know, the Indians, to wrap it up in a nutshell, were brought to the Caribbean, various islands, to work on the sugarcane plantations by the British. And
the Indian. Wait, hold on. I just want to be clear. I used to teach history, but I'm far from an expert. But you're telling me Indians were brought as slaves?
Indentured servants, they called it.
Okay, but, so and just for the record, that means that they eventually could buy their own plot of land. They'd still be savages or poor, but they could actually break out of. They weren't slaves.
Right. So, you know, and that's a really kind of complicated, loaded reduction, I think, of what that word might mean, because I think that it wasn't so clear-cut, and there were lots of impediments to freedom and a lot of restrictions, like in the cultural expression of how they were able to, you know, express their language and express their culture, their religion. So, you know, honestly, I really would love to research that more as well. But, you know, because other indentured servants who were, say, brought to Suriname by the Dutch did preserve their language of Hindi and ended up speaking Dutch and English as well. But somehow a lot of the Indians in Trinidad don't have any kind of connection to the language, as far as, like, it didn't stay, you know.
Right.
And
yeah.
Those who did end up preserving it or speaking it did so probably because they took classes, or maybe they were of, like, the priest, like, Brahmin class, you know, so they, like, held on to the language. But I think the general Indo-Trinidadian person does not speak Hindi, and that's really complex. And I actually found a book that I really want to read myself this summer called East Indian Music in the West Indies, by a researcher and I think ethnomusicologist called Peter Manuel. So that gives kind of like the history of, what happened to, like, what kind of folk traditions they held on to. But the fact was that not a lot of them were aware of Indian classical music, like Hindustani classical or Carnatic classical. They had more of a folk kind of legacy, and it was until the 60s that a teacher was brought by the Indian High Commission from, I think, the Punjab area, and his name was Professor H.S. Adesh, and he ended up being the guru, or the first guru of my dad, who studied harmonium, and he studied Hindi, and he became like a vocalist. And my dad kind of like raised me in that environment, and introduced me to tabla, and he was kind of my first teacher. So
this is blowing my mind. You have to. So wait, first of all, is your dad still around? Is he still alive?
Yeah.
Because I would love to talk to him. I would love to interview him. Okay.
Actually, he would be a better purveyor of those.
Well, no, he lived it. But I'm just trying to be clear. Your great grandparents came from India. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then somebody. Your parents, though, explain how who birthed you. Like I'm trying to figure out how. Is it Indian or is it Trinidad? Now I understand why they call it the West Indies. Yeah. You already helped me understand that, but your great grandparents were true-blooded East Indian cats, and then what happened from there?
So I think basically all the Indians kind of started working on the sugarcane plantations and then stayed, like, they used to live in, I think they had, like, they basically earned their way out of living on the plantations and
absolutely
and had, families. And I know on my dad's side, my dad's father died before I was born, but he was kind of like what they would call the local ustad, and like would sing scriptures and was Hindu. And so there was singing, but the primary instrument was like the dholak, not the tabla. And on my mom's side too, there were, elders who would sing as well. And they kind of settled into society. Like my dad was a policeman, my mom was a teacher, just like regular local Caribbean folk. But my dad always kept a musical practice. When my dad encountered this scholar, poet, teacher who came from India, he took on a really serious practice, and he started understanding what the tradition of Indian classical music and the vocal tradition, what that meant, and that teacher, Professor H.S. Adesh, brought not only music, but like contextualized it within, like Hindu mythology, scriptures, pujas, like cultural practices as well, so like he started from the ground up, and he had like books on singing the ragas and like the raga compositions, and so he really just changed completely, I think. He had an extremely important role in kind of rekindling a certain type of Indian cultural inheritance that might not have happened, I think, unless he'd gone to Trinidad. So
let me just be clear. I want to be. This is you consider which parent is Trinidadian?
Both of them. Both of my parents were born in Trinidad.
But even though so they were born in Trinidad, therefore you align yourself as a Trinidadian.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Okay, but they were both. But your mother, but both of them were birthed by people from India.
Yes, correct.
That is beautiful. Yeah. That is so beautiful. This is why you are. I don't know. You were born there, but your blood is from East. And your dad was someone who in that culture, from your earliest times when you were a baby, he was cultivating the lineage of the rhythms of India.
Yeah, I have so many memories of my dad, like waking up like at 5 a.m. and practicing. Like I would just hear him practicing. He would have tampuras, like the drone instrument, like around the house. Like when I was a baby, I have so many baby pictures of me. Like he'll put me in the middle of a group of instruments and take pictures. You know, like he was just
that is classic. That is, and so
yeah.
you were just vibrating off those rhythms.
Yeah, basically, you know, I mean, I really owe it all to him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and he kind of also was a performer and a teacher. We would go to cultural camps and like music competitions. And even though he was the one who exposed me to it, my mom was the one who, you know, when he was off playing out, my mom would be the one at home making me practice, like sitting with me and being like, practice now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm telling you, this cat's name who I interviewed, I'm going to send you the Facebook. It was Ustad Shahid Parvez Khan.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a master.
No, and what I'm saying is I went up there 5 months ago to Phoenix. He was in Chandler because this wonderful sarod player invited me up, and I did this Facebook Live interview with him, and he was very soft-spoken. He was a little bit apprehensive, but once we got into it, he started to talk about, I mean, in theory, in Western culture, you have children, I have children. Right. It's like, it's kind of a drag to practice, right? And it's like, and yet it was like not only mandatory, it was because his dad saw him as a master, potentially a master when he was a kid. So, I mean, your mom would have you practice. Was it all different types of like dumbbell? Was it only tablets, or were you across the board all the percussion?
No, that's the thing. Tabla is such a beast. I mean, like, I feel like when a lot of people take on tabla from the perspective of being Indian, maybe, you know, and growing up in the world of Indian culture, you know, like you just play tabla, you know, like,
right.
Or you play harmonium, or maybe you do one melodic instrument and one rhythmic instrument. But I have to say too, like I've seen some amazing like dholak players, like young dholak players in temples, in the Indo-Caribbean temples. There's so many of them in Queens and, you know, in New York City at large. But some of those young boys, mostly boys, you know, unfortunately.
No, I mean, I think that's one thing that makes you very almost a shaman, is that you are a high priestess. You're female. You know, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I'm trying to discover what that means for me.
Absolutely, it's but I'm just saying, be yourself. I mean, that it may take your whole life, but I mean, I think that, I mean, do you feel like you are doing? I mean, you are more of a. I mean, you're like my generation, probably like more like a Gen Xer. It's like, you know, the idea is, do you feel you're doing the best you can to instill authentic Indian raga music with your kids?
Wow, that's such a huge question. Yes, and it takes a lot of discipline. And
because this is what and I'll let you riff on this, but it's like your mom basically said, Roshni, practice. Now you have to practice. And it wasn't really, there was a real hierarchy in the family system. It's all flipped around now. You can see kids having so much more power than they used to have. And so like, you have to play more games with your kids to get them to do it? Or like, is it as easy as saying, hey, practice? Well,
you know, I feel so lucky to have my parents' presence in my children's lives, because my dad kind of, as a music teacher, you know, he teaches a lot in the Indo-Caribbean community of Queens.
Oh, he's local. You're so lucky.
Yeah, I know. I really.
You are so. So yeah. I mean, he's already. So tell me, explain how your kids, in their most honest moments, how they love not just they love him because he's the grandpa, but also. Like, what do they like about his teaching style, if they do like his teaching style?
That's so awesome that you asked that, because just the other day, my son came up to me, and he was like, you know, I really like Nana as a teacher. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, why? Like, because I'm, you know, obviously curious to know what he's responding to. So he was like, Nana doesn't give me too much at once. And Nana doesn't over-explain things to me. He just like gives me a little at a time, and he watches what I'll do with it, you know.
Wow. I dig. Yeah, that's such an old guard mentality, you know?
Yeah.
I love it.
I'm so proud of my dad, because that might not necessarily be the encounter I had with my dad.
Definitely not.
No.
But the truth is, your dad was out there burning playing on the bandstand, and it was really more your mom keeping that, pushing you forward. But I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's so funny because like sometimes my dad would be like a judge on the panel of a competition, and he would have no idea that my mom like prepared me for this and entered me into the competition, and I would just show up on stage and be like, "Excuse me."
I
Like,
love the mystery of it too. There's a I mean, why the lack of how in today's world a wife would not communicate with a husband that their daughter is going to be competing in this competition would be anathema.
I think she was just kind of like, it was like an inside joke.
Well, no, but yeah, she probably wanted to just have him get a kick out of it. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then it must have been kind of hard for him to be unbiased with that. I mean, it would be a difficult situation.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like honestly, my dad is my biggest critic too. Like, and I like the challenge of his presence. Like, I get my most nervous when he's there. It's like having my guru there as well. I've learned from Pandit Anindo Chatterjee, and whenever he's
Where is he located?
He is located in Kolkata.
Wow. So you have to do you do Skype or do you go back there?
He actually comes here like a couple times a year, and I sit with him, and I've taken group classes and privates with him. And he's an amazing teacher as well. But it really makes you nervous when these masters are present, and you have to kind of maintain the integrity of your own personal vision on stage, like living up to their expectation or whatever. So
let me ask you before we move on, do you feel like it's been a common theme with all the masters that I've talked to about their parents or their gurus being their biggest critic? Do you feel like you are able, we are more sensitive, our generation, and the millennials are even more sensitive, and our kids are going to be even more sensitive. And the thing is, do you feel that you are able to be a viable critic for your kids? It's okay to say no. I mean, it's okay to say no. I'm just saying these guys were run around I don't need to tell you. I mean, they were really. The criticism was intense, and that could turn a lot.
It's integral. Like, you need to know where you fall short. I mean, yeah, we're all kind of falling short always.
Always,
you know. And I do think that children shouldn't have kind of an inflated, or anyone should have an inflated sense of themselves, because in the face of those masters, we're kind of nothing, And I accept that about myself, and. I do want my children to understand the humility that comes with taking a step into this ocean of knowledge. I mean, it's you do what you can with the limits of your imagination and, like the time and the discipline. But I mean, masters who live this completely in created universes out of this material. I mean, I worship them, There's a reason.
God, talking to Roshni Samlal, I mean, she's Trinidadian, unbelievable situation. We have a game on this program called Name That Voice. Oh
no!
I think you'll be fine, but I really am more interested in you listening to the content of it.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Sounds great. Okay. Thanks.
Well, I mean, as you've already mentioned, my father was the premier tabla player of his generation in India. And I guess in order to be appreciated all over the world as a great practitioner of a particular art form from your country, you must first be recognized in your own country. And so in that sense, people like my father and Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and Pandit Ravi Shankar were already great musicians of, revered in our country, India, before they embarked on their journey across the planet to educate people into the art form that we all grew up with. So having done that already and established himself in India, he came over here along with Pandit Ravi Shankar, and they became a duo for about 25 or 26 years, inseparable, playing concerts everywhere in the world. And when he was here with Ravi Shankar and playing with places like Monterey Pop or Woodstock or wherever, he came across so many great musicians at that time because, as you know, in California was like the melting pot of new ideas and new interactions among musicians. People were just, getting turned on to musical ideas from all over the world. There were gamelan orchestras in California. There was codo drumming here. There was Afro-Cuban drumming here, and music, as well as Indian stuff, of course, set up by Ustad Ali Akbar Khan in Marin County. And so when my father was traveling in the West, and when Ravi Shankar and he were in America, they would drop anchor in Los Angeles and then travel outwards from there everywhere in the United States. And at that time, he came across great musicians like jamming with someone like Elvin Jones at Shelley's Manhole in Los Angeles, a small little club down there, or Buddy Rich, and frequently coming across those people and playing with them, and which led to the idea of him and Buddy Rich doing this album. And World Pacific was run by somebody called Richard Bach.
Well, I could go on and on. Do you know who that is?
That's Ustad Zakir Hussain.
Oh, Roshni got it. She got it. That's from I did an interview with him New Year's Eve 2012. That's how long and how much I've dedicated my show to world music. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about a couple things. When Alu Raka came here, I mean, India was still kind of in the dark at that point. It wasn't a world power that it is today. Mm-hmm. And he talked about before you can spread the lineage of raga music authentically in the world, you have to be considered a master in your homeland. Now, you threw a curveball to me, being that you are from Trinidad.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you're not really playing. You're playing Indian raga music. I mean, you are not playing Trinidadian. Yeah. Okay, so how do you feel about this idea? We live in a different time, but I do know that there is still India is still a hotbed of raga activity, and I wonder about the idea of you. Have you been able to go back, and is Roshni Samlal a name not across the entire country, but but is it? Do you feel like do you understand what he's saying, and do you believe it's still true today?
Right. I mean, like, that is a whole other scale of impact, and that is a whole other scale of being so close to the roots of the music and so close to the formation of the identity of Indian classical music. I mean, that's the seedbed right there, and those masters were so close to the seedbed, and just they carved a space for themselves. So I feel like that's a whole other scale to what I'm accomplishing currently, but that's still the scale that I'm fitting into, the lineage, So as far as like creating that much of an impact, or meaning I'm still a student.
No. I do. Listen, I know you are a spirit. Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Right. We're not going to confuse you with Ustad Alu Raka. But what I'm saying is, your guru is in Calcutta.
Yeah.
Does he implore on you, say, Roshni, you must come back and play here?
Oh, right. That sense of like nationalistic.
Exactly. I mean, saying, because what he was saying was the idea of, first of all, Ali Akbar Khan could have been the thing that's missing in our society today. India. One reason I wanted to connect with you for so long is because India is, before they were sending, and a lot of it had to do with the Beatles, but right. The cats that were coming over here were gurus, or in some cases, like Ali Akbar Khan could have been a pop star. He could have made millions of dollars. He could have been just a rock star. And what he chose to do was open the Ali Akbar College of Music. He wanted to give back and educate. And so while you can't necessarily put yourself in the same category as a master yet, does your guru talk to you about the national pride of raga music, and how Roshni needs to come back to her homeland, or I'm sorry, to the roots, in order to begin to ascend to a level of master?
No, there's not that sort of allegiance like that. There's not a stress on that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a stress on understanding the lineage, though. There's a stress on understanding the content and really listening to the masters, and where the compositions came from. So the musical, to trace the musical creation is definitely an accountability that's happening and being forged. But as far as like the national pride, I think it's a little bit more amorphous now because of the world that we live in. Post Ustad Ali Akbar Khan and post Pandit Ravi Shankarji, they've created so much of a globalized awareness of this music that now the integrity, if one wishes to think about it like that, is to the tradition, or how you maintain or wish to maintain the integrity toward the tradition while playing with another context, like a chamber context, or like improvising with musicians who are from other traditions, So my concerns right now is to just figure out my own sense of what I want my voice to do, like how much of my tradition do I want to carry with me when I collaborate with people of other musical traditions,
This is fat. So you talk about you articulated it very well. What would you say is the how deep back are the does the lineage go? I mean, to me, it's like you talk about paying homage to not necessarily having to go back and prove yourself in India, but the idea of learning, just understanding where it all came from. And I just wonder about, like, how do you put that, like, when you were playing with people from other musical genres, how do you communicate that on the bandstand?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, really, it wasn't very well phrased. You talked about just like sort of how far back the roots of the whole language go, how deep the lineage of raga music is, and can you talk about the beginnings of if possible, the beginnings of the cycles of raga music? I mean, how far back does it go?
Right. I think the raga music, as we understand it, and in my limited understanding of it, goes back to the kind of cultural fusion that happened when the Mughals, and Hindustani classical music in particular, goes back to the Mughal era when, we had masters like Tansen and Haridas, kind of created Khyal singing and Hindustani classical music as we know it, and that's a huge, that was a huge kind of like shift, I think, from kind of like the musical traditions being more like associated with temple music and spiritual music to more of a performative presence in the classical world in North India. And tabla came out of that collision between the Mughal influences and, kind of like, I think the mridanga is the ancestor of the tabla.
Wow, you are doing. I just want to let you know you are on fire right now. Just keep going. It's so good. This is so, because you know what, like the light bulb turns on for people when they talk about Mahapurush Mishra or Ali Akbar Khan or Ustad Al Raka, but it was going on way before that. Yeah. So what was the mother? You saying it was the father? Which instrument was before the tabla?
The mridanga. The mridanga came before, and there's, I don't think there's a conclusive story in how that happened, but it was cut, in half, they say, and kind of turned upward, and then having the tabla be at that position kind of created more of a classical virtuosic tradition, and within that virtuosic tradition, then you had the repertoire of actual tabla material coming out of it, so it became less of only an accompanist instrument and then more of a solo, with the solo capability as well. So My teacher is from the Gharana, the Furkbad Gharana, which he learned from Pandit Gyan Prakash Ghosh, who's another.
Oh, yeah, gold. Oh my God. Just a shaman. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. That term is definitely applicable.
It is, right? I'm not going to throw that around. I don't call that to everybody. I mean, Ghosh, man. I just know that at the Ali Akbar Khan School, they had a tabla class, and it got down. It was 50 something students back in the first year, and it got down to 4. And I've interviewed all 4 of those cats, and they just, I wonder, and from that, bands came out of that as well. And I wonder about, I realize you're a full-time teacher, but what is your, but would you really like to be a full-time musician?
I would, whether or not that's a viable option in, current New York City.
No, I'm saying if let's just put it in the context, because I think that, let's say it was, okay, like where you were, you weren't scraping by and, what would be Roshni Samlal's dream band? What kind of instrumentation? What kind of places would you like to play? And honestly, what kind of, I don't like genres of music, but would it be 2 sets of improvisation? Would there be songs? Like, what would your dream band look like?
Well, I'm lucky enough to be a part of some collaborations that I think that have the potential of becoming my dream band, and hopefully with my own study and time. Time is always the doozy in New York because everybody's, so busy. And
that's why I left. I grew up in Long Island. I'm so sick of the tempo. The tempo it drives me insane. I don't mind coming back to visit, but the vibe is just too frenetic. But okay, so let's just break that. First of all, you're going to do it, okay?
Yeah.
I feel this, but I just tell me the bands that you feel could. But if you're the leader, if Roshni's the leader, what does it look like?
I think that I definitely would want to have a strong Indian classical basis, and I would be the best tabla player I could be. Given that I would be able to just play at my best. And well, I'm the collective of the Women's Raga Massive that I'm currently in is amazing, and I think that we have a string section, and we have a Hindustani vocalist, and we have another percussionist who does like cajon and ocean drum. Wow. My dream band is really at my fingertips, interestingly enough, because I feel like the personnel is there for me, and another project I have is with kora player and oud player and producer Kane Mathis, and we have a project called Oracle that, again, it brings in that electronic component, which is something I'm really, 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 really interested in pursuing with tabla and like with loops and fixed media. So those 2 projects so far I think have the potential of really being my dream bands, because I really enjoy playing with the kora, and it has this kind of phrasing within its what would you say, canon, that is called kumbengo, and like with the phrase patterns, it's really compatible with tabla tala cycles, and I really love playing with that. So
well, it's a perfect segue. Why don't we listen to some of Oracle and then come back and talk about it? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by Abbott Taylor Jewelers, the Desert Heart Foundation of Southern Arizona, the Jewish Community Center of Southern Arizona, Craig Pretzinger of Allstate Insurance. We thank them for their support so we can play incredible world music like that for people around the world. And that was Oracle, spelled Orakel.
Yep.
Live at a very hip place that I've been to one time, called Shapeshifter, and Kane Mathis and Roshni, Samlal. You know, does the call and response exist in traditional raga music, or is that something that the kora, which I believe is African, does that does the call and response come out because of that instrument?
That's a really good question. I think that the call and response that you hear there is mostly just like the symbiotic playing between the tabla and the kora. But as far as like call and response in any classical music, it's more about responsive playing as opposed to that being like a part of the tradition. You know, with the melodic lines for a main instrumentalist, like a vocalist in Indian classical, you often have the harmonium or sarangi or violin kind of like helping to keep the musical energy going. And the tabla player as an accompanist is playing responsively too, and will try to mimic patterning, you know, or subdivisions or some kind of reference to like something percussive that the instrumentalist or vocalist might have done. With the kora and the tabla, yeah, I think that responsive playing is really a part of what we
absolutely. No, you did that. Was beautiful. I mean, I have to ask you very seriously. I would like you. How do you, for lack of a better term, how do you screw around with drummers, trap drummers? I mean, do you feel comfortable playing with them? Do you enjoy playing with them, or do you like to turn them inside out and upside down based on the fact that so many of the cyclical rhythms of ragas have nothing to do with, you know, playing in 4/4 time or things like that?
It's a little rough, and I haven't really. That's something I'm just beginning to explore. Honestly, it's a little tricky playing with kit.
I bet. But can you talk about it? Can you talk about why it's rough? I'm obsessed with rhythm. My whole show has become about rhythm, and why is it? Is it like a push and a pull kind of thing, or why is it rough?
Well, just sonically, sometimes the tabla can be really outweighed by the force of a kit, you know, like just on that level. The way that we occupy space might be a little bit different, you know, just like the register is different. But if you're playing with a sensitive drummer, you know, like I've played, I did this one gig at Jalopy with an amazing drummer, Dan Kerfist, who has an ensemble called Ensemble Fauna, and he played kit, he played like different frame drums, and it was great because he had the sensitivity to where I was coming from. So it's all about that, I think, and understanding the habits of each instrument. You know, like tabla can be really flat sometimes, and the cycle can be really horizontal. Like it doesn't have a lot of these vertical pops, and like, you know, you have to be kind of aware of maybe what the palette is that you're working with, and like how the virtuosity will express itself, and maybe make room for that, you know. So yeah, just sensitivity, musical sensitivity, I think is what it comes down to.
Because you had Elvin Jones playing with Alu Raka. I mean, you know, and Elvin played with Coltrane, but he could be totally sensitive player too. Actually, I would love to hear recordings of that. Even Buddy Rich.
Ooh.
Even here, you know, I don't know. I haven't listened to that Buddy Rich Alu Raka record, but
me neither.
is like, so just setting aside your gig as a teacher, which is just mind blowing. I mean, I just thought you were I thought like you'd just be traveling to different schools teaching tabla, but you are.
I wish. That's a dream come true.
So, I mean, if somebody, you know, you're very, you know, you haven't played in a while live, and you want to play. Are you somebody that? I mean, there are cats that, like, you know, musicians, you would call them, who have to pay the rent. So somebody's calling them for a funk gig or a classical gig or this kind of gig, and they have to do it because they okay. But then there's this idea of like being completely true to your artistic true nature and still being able to make a living. Granted, you're not a full-time musician at living, but are you somebody? Two-part question: are you somebody that will take on a gig if you're really jonesing to play any kind of gig? And then number two, what is Roshni's main goal what is your biggest, most important intention when you are playing live in front of people?
Right. I think if the gig, the hypothetical gig still makes me happy to play, like if I show up and I feel, if there's a certain level of, if it really feeds back into the grid of what I want to do with this instrument, and there are a lot of gigs that happen like that naturally in a place like New York, and not just because something is coming from a foreign musical tradition or even like a pop
absolutely
tradition does it kind of lessen the musical rigor, so I think as long as there is awareness of musical rigor, there's respect for time, respect for commitment, respect for and value for time and commitment, and it's universal, as musicians you need to take things on that definitely value time, so if somebody is approaching a project or even just like a gig, that might just be a corporate thing, you always have to weigh those factors: time, energy. Is it giving back to the tradition? Is it serving my growth? Or is it, deadening in some way? Or is it disrespectful?
Well, no, this is the thing, because, teachers are totally underpaid to begin with. So if a corporate gig comes along and it's like, someone's like, hey, Roshni, we want you to come, and it's just, and the money's good. Is it something you would just pass up based on your principles? Or is that something that you're going to say, God, I'm living in the per capita, one of the highest gross, truthfully, what do you do? Because right. I'd probably be taking the gig.
I would too. Yeah, I would too. Musicians are always looking for patrons, so that's what the palaces were all about,
I dig.
Fontaine was paid to compose, so again, valuing time, valuing energy. Yeah, I think that's a part of it. And we can't really afford to completely divorce the aesthetics and the innermost chambers of why we do the music from just daily living. So I think that's fine.
Do you we've already started school back in Arizona here, but how do you tell me about your mood aside from just the exhaustion and the amount of work of being a teacher? Right. What does it symbolize for? There are beautiful, the greatest thing about Indian music for me is that there are morning ragas, afternoon and evening ragas. There are definitely seasonal ragas. And I wonder about Roshni's heart as you get ready to go back to this labor after right. Labor Day. I'm sure that you are able to carve out opportunities to play, but psychologically, how is it always for you when you have to go back and do this solemn duty of supporting and making sure it's something I struggle with a lot. What is your emotion like as you come up on another school year?
There's definitely a level of apprehension, but I hope to meet that with discipline. It's the kind of thing that only discipline will solve. As far as it just makes you really aware of where your energy goes and accountable, and creating structures. I have to create structures that facilitate practice. That's kind of a non-negotiable at this point. So
I dig discipline, but that discipline traces back to Trinidad. That's when your mom was saying practice, Roshni. You have to.
It's a lifestyle. It truly, truly is a lifestyle, and the things that don't fit into it get cut out. That's just how it goes. And that's the sacrifice you kind of make when you take it on, because it's something that's, and as cliched as it sounds, it's inside of you, and you do it because the momentum is there, the purity is there, and it has to come to fruition with how you spend your time and what you do with your time. So it's always a constant kind of like self-reminder to, like, instead of just wanting to veg out, and like watch a show or something, or just go to bed, you just have to like push it a little bit extra.
There's nothing wrong with relaxing. I mean, by the way, there's the,
right.
but I'm with, I mean, like, how many gigs do you play, June to August or each month? And then how many do you play during the school year?
Yeah, like June to August, and it fluctuates too, but like about 10 to 15 gigs a month.
During the school year?
And even during the school year too, yeah. I mean,
that's fantastic. So it doesn't even dissipate. I mean, you still find the time. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. And, having such a thriving local community, I think, is a part of it, because I don't have to go on crazy tours during the school year. There's that much happening here, and so I'm really grateful to be in a place like New York that, I can contribute and gain from the local community.
Do you feel that a musician is considered in this society now? Is music a musician's gift to the world, or should it be seen as a profession? I'm very bummed out that you go back to the mid-'50s, Dizzy Gillespie. I mean, he wasn't making millions of dollars, but
right.
Neither was Miles, but they were respected as geniuses because they were creating new language and doing something completely different. And it was seen as a profession. And I see it now as a situation where, not necessarily for you, but I guarantee you've been in situations where it's like, you're in a group and they're like, yeah, you can, even in New York, you can pay to play, or you can play for the door, or, and to me, that speaks to this idea of, because we live in this quantified time, it's all data driven, and music is so spiritual and so unquantifiable that if you can't do that, then therefore, it must be just given for free. I'd like you to riff on the idea of musicians as a profession, and why you think that, if you think that's really how we should view this, how we should look at it as a society.
Wow. I definitely think it should be valued, as far as, having its production, its artistic production, its mental work, its time, its labor. There's a lot of funding that needs to go toward music and the survival of musicians, for sure. So as far as the industry existing, I definitely think it should, because so many people are relying on their skill. It's a skill, so I think it should be definitely rewarded as such. And just like any other sort of societal production, music is there too, and it happens to just be one that really runs deep and comes from craft and comes from the merging of a lot of different worlds, so I don't see it as kind of being, let's say, corrupt or hypocritical or kind of like dissonant in a way, just because it kind of inhabits and comes from more mystical spaces, right? But you bring it to the world, and you bring it through your body and through your time and energy. So I think that I 100% support, the music industry and the fairness that pays musicians.
You realize that when you become a leader on your own and you go out and take the insecure path and maybe leave a profession like teaching, that you're going to have to be preaching that to club owners.
Oh God.
I'm sure you already do, but it's like, music is a reflection of what's happening in society. And right. So, I mean, to me, it's not even about funding. Yeah, we need funding. You need to put, they take instruments out of all the minority schools, and that's a whole other thing. But the idea of just saying, we are going to put on a spiritual burning performance of music, and we deserve and are entitled to be compensated for it. And I wonder, you probably have already run into that situation
where I didn't feel fairly compensated,
or where you had to actually talk truth to power to some club owner, or maybe somebody within a band had to do it, where they're like, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, are you? I mean, listen, there are cats. You talk to Chuck Rainey or all these great studio cats. They would go out and play any gig, mainly because they were in the studios all day, so they were making good bread, and they could go out and play for free. I mean, are you willing to do that, or do you hold the line?
If I had the lifestyle that supported that, I mean, like, I get together with lots of friends that we, in classical music you call it ragas. It's your sadhana, it's your practice, and there's time and space for that, and it's a learning experience. But yeah, you have to just kind of weigh it out and see if it serves if it's sustainable. If it's not sustainable, then then it's kind of like you're kind of biting yourself in the butt. But I don't know. I mean, it's important to collaborate just for the spirit of creating, for sure. But how could you do that if you're not taking care of your basic needs? Like, that joy can't come from an impoverished and stressed out state.
No, you're 100% right. I look at it and I say, in some ways, it pains me to know that someone like yourself can't, in a stress-free environment, commit yourself to full-on artistic creation. That you need to take up a gig outside of that in order to do it. And a part of it's just the cost of living. But, I mean, listen.
Having children and, the need to have some amount of, like, stability with that. But, I mean, sometimes, too, in a lot of, and there's so many running jokes about coming from, like, South Asian families and immigrant families where your parents need to know that you have some level of security, like maybe your parents wouldn't be happy if they knew you were just kind of taking this artistic path.
I mean, I don't think that that's just South Asian. I think that's, but yeah, it is. I think it's at every ethnicity, every people. But I just know that when I had my children, I became less conservative, less responsible, and I just went towards my true nature completely. And there are consequences for that. But I would say to you that I just feel like when the time is right, when you feel it inside your soul, you make a move to go towards the insecure path, because then you will really find, I mean, you already are a spirit, and you will find that you will transcend to even higher level because of that, because you are really accessing your true nature. And I just look forward to, before I let you go, I know you're not going to be in town. I'm going to be in New York. Could I do a Facebook Live interview with your father?
Yeah, I can put you guys in touch. I'd be happy to do that. And
because I got a couple of days free. I'll send you a couple of samples that I've already done, but you're not there, so he's the next best thing by far.
Yeah, I think he would be happy to, and I think that would be great.
I love it. All right, well, Roshni, I knew this would be fun, and I will get you a copy of this later, and thank you for being who you are and bringing love to the world through rhythm.
Thank you so much for your interest and support and patience in making this happen. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Enjoy Arizona. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Another cosmic day here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Heard from Lau Noah in hour 1, and just got off the phone with an amazing Indian raga tabla player, Roshni Samlal. We will be back at some point in the near future. I'm off to New York next week. We're cooking the groove here on the Jake Feinberg Show.
Shall we say, shall we call it fine?